Guys, welcome back to the Link Up. I'm Kim Smith Jenkins, and I'm so glad you are here with us again. We are so appreciative of you just tuning in every week as we continue to dive in and learn more about some phenomenal women. These women are incredible, and they are really the reason why I started Link Media. Just a little bit about myself. I come from the television industry. I spent about 12 years in TV news, working my way up through local news, and it has been great because it has allowed me to really tap into one of my passions, which is storytelling. But it also has opened up a great network of friends who I now call family. And the TV business is honestly very, very small. So you all kind of like come across one another, meeting each other. And with Link Media, a big part of what we're doing is not only through our membership services, where we're creating networks of authentic relationships with women in entrepreneurship and business, but we're also focused on the content part, where we are telling stories that matter in whether it's women's issues, socially, politically, as well as things that will help you out in your professional life. So that will all be coming up as we're getting ready to unveil our new blog and also through this show, The Link Up. So I'm so happy that we're able to just tap into my social circle, some phenomenal women who are in my life who constantly inspire me. And today on our show, we have LaChina Robinson. And I love just watching this woman just really just be such a light to the world in her, not only in the sports arena, but also as she mentors young women. And that's what we're all about here with Link Media. And just a little bit, I gotta brag on LaChina, right? Like, she has been an awesome inspiration for me in my professional career. She has spent more than 12 years in the sports TV news industry. She has climbed the ranks. She's now ESPN analyst for the WNBA. And she continues to tell stories about women in sports, which is so, so important. She also hosts Around the Rim, a podcast that you need to check out. Make sure you tune in and find it. And then also she has Rising Media Stars, where she helps bring up the next generation of female sports broadcasters, especially women of color. And I just love everything about you, LaChina, and I love that you're here with us today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, Kim, that introduction, I don't know if I'm worthy of that. Thank you so much.
You are, queen.
Good to be here with you. You too, queen. I'm excited about everything you're doing with Link Media. It's so dope, and glad we can share some time together.
Yeah, so I just want to dive right in because we have so much to talk about in this episode. So as we think about the sports world in general, let's start there because we are in a different climate right now. And, you know, we both actually take it back to when we first met. We actually met at a gathering that was geared towards Black professionals in the sports industry. I do remember that day where we met at Phillips Arena, now State Farm Arena. And we met and we were able to network and just connected and just became close since then. And I think that having those type of organizations or networking events is so important to share and amplify voices that are underrepresented, especially in the sports industry, which is very surprising because a big part of sports, there are a lot of Black and brown people on the courts and on the fields. And so we do need more of us telling those stories as well. And as also on the business side. But when you think about the climate that we're in, it's so important that we're able to really speak up, especially as sports journalists during this time because of all of the social unrest that we're facing in society. And the WNBA actually, a few years ago when there were protests going on, there were some things where coming out where players felt like they weren't able to really speak up because of the penalties that they faced. But now, what are you seeing as people around the world are really having this uprising and speaking out against social injustice?
Yeah, Kim, thank you so much for bringing this up because it's such an important topic, especially for us, right? We're both Black women. We're the double minority. And in my opinion, Black women have been the unheard and unseen in our world, right? When you look at where our world has placed their value and the faces they've put in the media that are supposedly the beautiful faces and the people that they pick to represent their organizations, they're not our face. And so I'm excited about this time in a way because I just feel like a togetherness and a unified voice with Black women. And what you touched on is extremely important for me as a Black woman to be covering a league in the WNBA that's 80% Black women. I mean, when you look across our sport even 10 years ago, there just weren't enough faces covering the sport that looked like those that were on the court. And even in today's climate, I find myself explaining sometimes to people how this experience is different for WNBA players. Like, for example, start with the coronavirus, which is disproportionately impacting people of color. And so how these women are analyzing their playing season or potential playing season or thinking about life decisions are very different from how, maybe women's soccer is a majority white league may be considering returning. Black families are more likely to know someone that was sick or know someone that died from it. But also, we're still finding out from health, research, maybe Black people have some kind of gene that makes us more susceptible. So having to explain that was both a burden, but also a great honor for me in a league that needs a voice of someone I feel like that looks like me in those particular moments. But also when it comes to social justice, you're right. The Minnesota Lynx, we all remember that picture of them in a press conference back in 2016 with Alton Sterling and Philando Castile names on their shirts and then saying Black Lives Matter. Like, that was an important moment for the WNBA, but this was a league that was kneeling. This was a league that was out protesting even before now. It has really been on the forefront. And people always ask me what I think it is about the WNBA. Well, these women know what it feels like to be left out. They know what racism feels like firsthand. They know what prejudice looks like. They know what unconscious bias is. They see police brutality in their neighborhoods. Again, a league that's 80% Black. So what better voice to step up than a league of women who have gotten used to sacrifice? They go overseas and play, 7 months a year to make a living. They're fighting for coverage. They pretty much fight for anything. So in a way, I always say that the WNBA has everything to lose and then nothing to lose because no one's really checking for them. But they're definitely making a name for the league and how they've used their voices to speak up on social injustices.
And speaking of all of those things that they are fighting against, they are honestly a good picture of what it's like for a lot of women in society, because not only are they fighting, for just all of the things that you named, but also with pay to be able to, be treated as, like you mentioned, having to go overseas and play international ball. Like, the NBA players don't have to worry about that during their off season. And so when you think about just that level of equality, and we've seen, especially rest in peace, Kobe Bryant was a big advocate for the WNBA, and just seeing how people recognize the disparity there. And that is just the same picture that a lot of women in corporate America face, where they're paid way less than their male counterpart. As you're seeing all of this constantly, unfold in society, how are you seeing, and who are some of the players that that are just very vocal when speaking out about some of these issues, and have you seen progress there?
Yeah, I've been just really proud of the women in this league because it has not been necessarily the faces. I mean, when Maya Moore is at the forefront of this, a name that everyone knows, what she's done for criminal justice reform, even giving up her career to be on the front lines, is tremendous. So it definitely starts with her, but I've been excited to see some other voices really coming up during this time. Natasha Cloud of the Washington Mystics, who wrote an article for the Players Tribune that your silence is a knee in my neck, and really challenged her white counterparts. Yeah, really challenged her white counterparts and the majority community to use their platforms to speak up, to say that you're anti-racist, because it's going to take everyone to make a change. And then you have Renee Montgomery of the Atlanta Dream, who's also been very vocal. She was one of the first players, if not the first player, to announce that she would not be playing this season because she plans to spend her summer working on issues of social justice. And she's been in the streets of Atlanta handing out water and protesting and bringing awareness to so many issues. So there are a lot of players that are really working out in the forefront and using their voices, but those are a few that have stood out to me in their efforts. But this is a league where across the board, they're all doing their part.
Yeah, and then between the WNBA and the NBA, players are just trying to figure out, do they want to come back during this time and play during this condensed season? And a lot of players, we've seen Kyrie Irving and kind of rallying the troops and speaking out on that call. There are a lot of reasons, like you mentioned, COVID-19 is a big health concern. And then also people feeling like, is this the right time for us to come back and play during all the social unrest? Are we just distracting from the broader narrative that we do need a change in America? I think there are a lot of feelings that have people conflicted because it is your form of income. A lot of people are supporting their families based off of their being able to play basketball, and then you're conflicted of the competitive side of you wanting to get back out there. But then you realize the bigger story, and as you're constantly like watching as things consistently like come out, the headlines, we're just all monitoring what's going to happen. But what are you kind of hearing as things develop, as people get prepared to come back on the court?
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot from players that have concerns about returning. And obviously, as you just went through, there are a lot of things to consider. I mean, this is their livelihood. They love the game of basketball. They want to get back out there. They want to make money for their families, for their communities. But at the same time, the disproportionate impact of the coronavirus, we still don't know a lot about this virus. The numbers are starting to really spike again in the United States, right as these teams are supposed to be reporting to get ready to play. There's injury that's a consideration because many of these players have not been on a basketball court since, beginning of March. So there's a lot, and when you play on a team your whole life, you are a teammate. You're expected to show up and do your part. And here it is. They're having to make an individual decision in terms of how they feel about their health and the overall value of this season. Because I do think there's an underlying feeling across the board in sport right now. We have the tendency as a society to look at athletes as entertainment and forget that they are people, that they have families. I mean, what the NBA and WNBA in particular are asking their players to do, to go to a single site, or what they're calling a bubble, for up to 3 months, and to be away from their family for some of that time, and to be risking your health. I mean, when you're on a basketball court, you have no mask and you're not 6 feet apart, which are the two recommendations of the CDC of how to not spread the coronavirus. Now, both leagues are putting all the precautions that they can in place between testing and, quarantine measures coming in, making sure there's no contact with these players and outside people, but they still say that it's a risk. I mean, it is. I mean, they're still asking them to risk who knows what. I was going to say their lives, and I know that's not the case for everyone, but as we've seen, it has been the case for a lot of people. And so do you really want to take that risk? Do you need to? Do you have to? So there's a lot of other things and layers that go into it. A lot of the players in the WNBA are moms. And so, you're considering either taking your child into the single site situation, or maybe leaving them at home with a relative. And that's a long time. But when you have to pay bills and you have other things happening, it's a decision that, Kim, you're a mom, I definitely would not want to make for myself or for my child.
Yeah, definitely a tough place to be in right now as they kind of navigate all of this. Everyone is trying to figure out, how do we approach this new normal that we're operating in every day? And as you think about just sports journalism as a whole, the fact that representation matters, that statement could not mean any more when it comes to the sports business. Even I know the feeling, what it's like, especially covering a variety of sports where oftentimes, not like you mentioned earlier, being a double minority, a Black woman, oftentimes being the only person of color and sometimes the only female in the room, it is a lot of times often just I think overlooked the fact that it takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of fight to be in those rooms, to raise your voice and to be heard and to be seen. and to be valued by television organizations who for a long time had a vision of what it looked like to be a sports broadcaster. I remember when I was starting out, it was a cookie cutter mold. And I think we started around the same time, and it was, often rejected because I did not fit the blonde hair, blue eye version of a sports female broadcaster. And that just fueled me, and now to see, obviously I'm transitioned out of the business, but still in touch with a lot of you guys. And I just root you on because I just love seeing you guys continue to dominate the space and making room for more women of color. And just what you're doing, Carrie, Jamel Hill, Maria, all of you guys just really, climbing that ladder and just really setting the stage to let them know that, hey, our voices are just as important in perspective. I think that is one thing that I found was so important. It's behind the scenes, right? Like you mentioned, you have that perspective. So when you're sitting down in editorial meetings and people aren't thinking about, hey, did you guys think about that the Black community is greatly impacted by COVID-19 and this is what they're thinking about as a family? And it's like, aha, that's a story. That's something, and it leads to these things coming out to the public. And that perspective is so key. How have you seen, I know we still have a long way to go, but how have you seen the journalism industry really, as everyone is trying to now think more about inclusivity, have you seen that response within journalism and the need for more? Obviously, you have your nonprofit that is supporting that necessarily that mission.
Yeah. Well, what I've seen most immediately in recent weeks is the response has been, let's put Black people on television and up front more, right? Like all of a sudden there's this move to let's show that we have Black people, which is great, but it's something that in my opinion should have been done. What often happens with Black men and women is we get hired, which may make the numbers look sort of balanced, but then we're not used. We're not put on the big assignments. We're not valued. Our voices are not heard. So we are seeing some change in front of the camera. And I think part of it is that people want to have the optics look appropriately in terms of how they support diversity. But when you look in the decision-making room, there is none of that. Those are the rooms where there really has to be more change, whether that's the editorial room on the news side or production, directors, producer, and sports. We're nowhere to be found in positions of leadership and talent hiring. So Kim, I am encouraged by some of the change we have seen, but at the same time, I'm not at all. And I'm actually very, very disappointed. I feel like we should be further. I feel like these are conversations, even in covering WNBA, I feel like there's still efforts made to hide our sport, which is a microcosm of the way we hide Black women. And so we're still every day pushing not only for content to be diverse, but for Black faces that are hired in news and sports media to be utilized. And then for there just to be more of a commitment to true diversity and inclusion. I mean, Kim, and you know this, you can put it in the mission of your company all you want. And, you can say that you don't have a racist culture, but it's truly seen in how you run your organization, where you put your resources, how you pay your women versus your men, how you pay your white women versus your Black women. That is where true inclusiveness is seen. And we have a long way to go yet and still in broadcast journalism and on the sports side. And that is one of the reasons why I wanted to start Rising Media Stars is, it's one of those things where I got into this business almost on accident. Like I was not a communications major, didn't study broadcast journalism. I literally was 27 years old going through a midlife crisis and decided to make a career pivot. And thank goodness God I'd say he was in agreement with him, but he made the decision first and brought me on board that this is where I needed to be. And so he continued to open doors. But that transition, it was tough. I was grateful for the women that came along that did help me, the Carolyn Pecks of the world and so on. But, you show up and you say, okay, this is where I want to be. This is my interest. Here's my demo reel. And they look at you as, well, we've already got a Black girl.
Yeah. I've heard that one.
That one before. Yeah, like basically there's only room for one of you. So that's the immediate reaction. And then when you do get the job, it's almost like you feel the responsibility to keep the door open for the next Black woman. Like you have to be perfect and you have to do everything exactly right, because if you don't, you know good and well that that company that barely hired you is never going to hire another Black woman. And so there are a lot of levels of what we have to deal with even in terms of the microaggressions that we get in television, media, and broadcast journalism. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times it was like, if there's a rapper here, I need to know who that is, right? Like, this is an assumption. Well, who's this? It's a rapper on front row with gold chains, and I'm like, I have no idea who, or I wear my hair cornrow to work, and it's like, oh, you've got vacation. No, this is not vacation hair. Like, this is how we wear our hair. It's an expression of our culture. So I can go on and on about the things that I faced throughout my career, but I think I'm definitely at a point as a mentor where I feel a responsibility to speak up, because if I don't, I am not doing right by the young women that are part of our Rising Media Stars program and others that want to be a part of this industry.
And speaking of the women that you're mentoring, what are some of and share with us as we're watching, because I'm sure other women are itching to know some of your tips, but as women of color trying to break into the industry, what would you recommend? Especially, I have girls that reach out to me often and they don't really understand, like you just put it so eloquently about the fact is that we have to be almost perfect to make sure that the next person behind us doesn't, does not get overlooked or just passed up because we messed up. So what's the number one thing that you would tell a young woman of color as she's trying to break into the industry, and the thing that they need to really be prepared for that they may be facing once they're in?
Yeah, that's a good question, and one I could a lot of different answers to. But I think the first thing is to really be intentional about your brand, right? I think the first thing as a young Black woman coming into this industry, I had to decide was that I was going to bring myself to work every day. So you kind of have to decide. First of all, you're going to be different because you have brown skin, but you're beautiful. But you really have to embrace who you are, and that's your unique story, your unique journey, maybe how you wear your clothes, maybe you want to wear your hair natural, whatever that is, you kind of want to decide on and be intentional and proud of the brand that you bring. So doing a lot of self-reflection is the first part, like know why you want to do this. A lot of young women end up figuring out how hard this really is, right, Kim? And they realize that they wanted to do this because they wanted to be seen and they wanted to be around athletes. Well, let me tell you, that is like 2% of the actual job, right? A lot of the work is actually happening behind the scenes. So doing the self-reflection work, really knowing what your brand is, what your purpose is in this industry is really important to sit down and do first and foremost. And then I also, one thing that's been good for me in terms of being in front of the camera is just finding those odds and ends to practice. Like, I know practice makes perfect sounds like so cliche, but no job is too small when you have a chance to get what I call a rep, right? So you get repetition you can get it at a high school game. You can get it, with your friend and her video camera with you standing in front of an arena that you never actually covered the game in, like there's so many different ways that you can get repetition, but don't be afraid to volunteer, to shadow, to do those little things that give you a competitive edge, because as I mentioned, as Black women, we're not going to get as many opportunities to prepare, and we're also not going to get that many opportunities to make mistakes. And I got my confidence over time from just practicing. I mean, they send me, it didn't matter where they went. I mean, and I love calling any games, but I tell people all the time, I've been to Itta, Mississippi. I've been to the Dukes of the world. I've been to the smallest schools, but I've also been to some of the largest, and I treat every game the same. So just find ways to get your reps, and that's where your confidence comes from, is that practice. Again, high school games, doesn't matter. But last but not least, I also think being intentional about having allies. Like, here's the thing that I say about mentoring. Yes, my natural inclination was I want to go find the Black women and I want them all to be my mentors so they can tell me how I'm supposed to do this, right? But the truth is, the Black women aren't in the room, right? We're not quite there where we are able to move the needle. We're getting there. You know, you see people like Issa Rae and, you know, others that are starting to create their own production companies, and we're the ones hiring. And yes, that is the case in some spaces, but definitely not all. So you do have to have white women, white men as allies for you, and it's going to take some discomfort. A couple of quick stories for me on that end is one of my first mentors. This is actually when I was in sport administration. Was a white man named Paul Griffin. Now he was a senior athletics director. I was like a peon in the company, and my boss would travel a lot, so she would say, "Oh, I have to have a meeting with Paul. You go have it." Now this is my boss's boss. So here I am sitting in front of this white man who's probably, 55, 60 years old. I'm 22, Black, young, and we are literally sitting across the table from each other when this all started, just kind of like looking. I mean, it was the most uncomfortable space I had ever been in. Like literally, I would come in and just slide my paper over, sit back, he would get it, make a couple marks, slide it back, and I would just leave, right? Over time, we started talking. "Oh, is that your family back there?" He had some pictures. "Yeah, that's my nephew." Then he'd say, "Well, do you have any family?" And we just started to talk and develop a relationship. Again, he's a senior associate athletic director. So all of a sudden, my name was put into spaces that my face would never show up, right? Because he started to believe in me. He started to see that I had a gift. And I know it was, first of all, it was very uncomfortable for me. And I know it's uncomfortable for a lot of people to sit across from someone who is very different from you. But in order for us to penetrate the spaces we want to be in this business, you got to find allies and people who are in those rooms, who are willing to vouch for you, and that want to help you make that climb. And then when you get in the room, then you can pull other women of color with you.
That's exactly our mission. Be positioned to position others. That's one of my quotes that I live by, and so important. Like, I actually remember, now that I've transitioned out of being on air, I am working more with the business side of things in the tech industry, and working with local and national TV networks. And I see how white the room is all the time. I go to large conferences, and I'm literally everyone knows me because I'm the only Black person that they've seen all day. And so I stick out like a sore thumb. And so when you understand the business side, like you mentioned, the decision-making side does not look like us. There's no representation there. You cannot, as a young journalist, be intimidated by that. You have to almost embrace it. And as you mentioned, knowing your brand, not being afraid of promoting your brand. And that's something, if I could tell my younger self, is like, you have to be your biggest advocate, your biggest cheerleader, put yourself out there more. Don't worry about what the world is going to think, but you have to promote yourself, because you can't wait for that station to give you that promo spot or to give you the lead story. You have to put your stories out there. And now that, with social media and all this technology that at your fingertips, you can do that by sharing these stories over and over. So if someone didn't see your story in small town Alabama on the 5 o'clock newscast, put it on YouTube, put it on Facebook. You never know where it will go, and you can be your biggest cheerleader and your number one advocate. And like you mentioned, having those people there to give you that opportunity or to see your work ethic. Don't be afraid about mentioning, "Hey, these are all of the things that I've done, and these are the things that I want to do. These are the kind of stories I'm trying to tell." Because you never know what's going on in the background, because they could be thinking about, "Oh, we're actually working on this new show. You'd be great for that." And if you put yourself out there first, it's that opportunity. It's inserting yourself into the conversation. And so that's my little piece of advice.
Yeah, no, I love that. And you know what? It's like we, in our brilliance as Black people, as Black women, when we show up, we change how people see our race. We change how people, see our capabilities. Like, when Kim shows up and people are like, "Wow, she's sharp." The next time that person has a hiring opportunity, it may not be Kim, but it may change the way they see the next young woman coming in who has an interview and they're like, wow, I see people of color in a different light. And it's sad that that has to be the case. But when we show up and we are who we are, to me, the world changes. And like you said, you got to be brave and bold and step into it. But yeah, no, that's great advice, Kim. I love that.
As we are, just rooting to see more representation, more of us. And you mentioned a little bit too about the hair, something that I was afraid to do as early on in my career. I am loving seeing all of the natural hair out there with women rocking everything from braids like you and Roz and my girl MJ, and just like seeing the natural hair front and center is just awesome because it truly represents our culture, and we're not having to conform because we have this new job.
Yeah. No, you're right. And I have to give a major shout out to two people. One person, Cheryl Miller. Like Cheryl Miller was really rocking some straight up like braids back when she was working at TNT. One of the goats of the game, but also Jamel Hill. Like, to be honest, Jamel has inspired me to embrace my blackness in so many different ways. Like she is such a role model for me, and I know so many others, and just how she is unapologetic about being black and speaking out and sharing her feelings, but also in her appearance. I did a talk with her and Carrie a couple days ago, and she was just saying how she was a tomboy kind of, like coming up. She was that person because she was a writer. She never worried about how she looked on television. And so she is just authentically brought herself. Now, she did say she's touching up with a little more makeup now, but she still rocks her braids. And I'm just like, yeah, like Jamel has so inspired me. But it is important because, I went through this with my natural hair. It was like, I want to be as healthy as I possibly can, mind, body, and spirit. And I realized that I was getting my hair done in ways that were discouraging me from working out. And I'm like, because I didn't want my hair to sweat out. And I'm like, I can't live like this. Like, I need to be holistically healthy. So I have to find a way or a style or something that's going to allow me to live not just a life that I can be camera ready, but a life that makes me proud and feel good about myself on the inside. And so when I went natural, I used to wear a lot of weaves with leave outs, and I'd be like, oh, sweating, it would be breakage and all this stuff. And then one day, as you can see right now, as I have my little twist out style with my flat twist, is I was like, you know what? Be beautiful. Like whatever you look like in your most beautiful state, like be that. And stop trying to be this vision. And I'm not gonna lie, if I was at a different point in my career, would I be thinking this way? I don't know, because when I first started out, I wanted to look like the women on TV because I thought that's what was gonna give me a job. Now that I have a job, I want to be myself and be happy and work out and all those other things. So no judgment at all for what people choose to do with their appearance. But I just think we as Black women have to keep in mind that we've been constantly reminded that our culture is not American culture, and that's not true. We have African American culture of our own, and we've got to own it and really be bold in expressing it.
That's a great segue because our Woman of the Week, every week on the Link Up, we highlight an amazing woman, trailblazer, someone that is really setting the standard in the industry. And you mentioned her already, Jamel Hill, our Woman of the Week. You know what? When you just talked about, just what she represents, just far as like physically for the Black culture on air, but also just, seeing the perspective that she offered. She was unapologetically Black on ESPN, and I loved every bit of it. And even after she parted ways with the network, I knew she was going to be all right. And as you mentioned, her and Carrie now have their new show. I'm excited to see that with Vice TV. Bravo, ladies. So as I saw her just continue to evolve from a columnist in print to television, I just loved seeing her journey and just seeing the fact that she did not I feel like it's just given her even more freedom to do more of it and to just be able to offer that insight, because it's so important that these stories are being told. And as we said, companies are now realizing the value of perspective, especially coming from communities that people don't understand unless you live and walk in it every day. And so, Jemele Hill, we honor you, but if you could just share, I knew that you knew her, and I just wanted to hear maybe a story or just a memory that you have just with Jemele.
It's funny. I wish I had actually looked at the story before we got on, but I'm just now reminded, when Jemele was suspended, I think she ended up getting suspended, not after her comments about or towards the president. I believe it was after she had made some comments about the NFL and was suspended. They took her off television. I had a personal protest of my own. Like, I literally left social media and I wrote about it in my journal. I was just like, this is not fair. I'm so tired of the racism. I'm so tired of Black women not being able to fully express ourselves. And I know she did come back and say some things in regards to how she felt afterwards about her comments. But to me, it was just, I had came to an end with everything she had to go through up until that point, from the president's remarks and just various things. So I just kind of went on my own, like, silent really for me professionally. I was like, from this moment forward, I am going to use my voice to speak up. And I'm not gonna lie, I've been one, when I started my career, it was like, okay, how much can I say? How much can I not say? Because I wanted to stay in good graces. And not that I ever wanted to be disrespectful. I just wanted to speak up for what was right and use my voice and bring awareness to different issues. And so there were some times early in my career where I was definite voice and bring awareness to different issues. And so there were some times early in my career where I was definitely leaning on the side of trying to be accepted and being the type of Black girl that I thought would put me in position to take it off television. I promised myself in her honor that I would change that perspective, that I would join her in the fight when I could, that I would continue to fight for coverage of the WNBA because they deserve it with a majority minority league. And so it really, even from afar, Jemele has always had an impact on me and how I carry myself as a journalist and how I use my voice. But then just, there were a couple of times I remember, like, there was something she posted, and I can still see the picture. This was probably like in 2015. It seemed like forever ago. But she posted something about women getting harassed in media, and she mentioned my name in her post. Like, she mentioned a bunch of journalists, and she said, and LaChina, and I was like, she knows who I am. Like, it was like one of those moments. But she does. She finds ways to pull others up along the way. I mean, you remember she used to bring people in for his and hers and have different hosts that were young women and young men and journalists. Like, I mean, the list goes on and on, the way Jemele has not only used her voice, but carried the tribe along with her. And so everything I do now, when it comes to the intersection of my career and my culture, I use her as an example for me. And even when it comes to mentoring and just pulling other people with you. So she's impacted my life. She's a friend who I've been grateful to spend the time with her that I have in her presence. She's so thoughtful and she's so brilliant and she's just so educated on so many different things. I'm just indebted to her for what she's meant to me and how she's been a role model.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jemele, for all that you represent for all of us as Black female journalists in this business. It's so important for what you do. And thank you, LaChina Robinson. You are incredible. You are such an inspiration. And like I said, you're such a light. And I appreciate all that you are in my life and just being able to just walk this walk with me as we're continuing to build up Link Media. So I'm so grateful for your time. Thank you for sharing your story. And you guys, make sure you follow her on social media and as well as check out her podcast, Around the Rim. And also follow us at Link Media. That's LNQ Media. And guess what? We'll see you next time on the Link Up. Thanks for joining us.